Now, in terms of, you've grown a ton. I mean, Fawn Design, it's such a social brand. Like, your Instagram following is huge. You get a lot of engagement there. But what were some of the hiccups along the way?
Oh, that's always like the question, right? Like, where do we start? Let me get out that notepad page, right? You know, and I know it's kind of cliche of like, oh, but you know, I've made mistakes, but I've learned so much. And that really is like, you hear that and you're like, yeah, but when you're actually living that, you don't look at it. I almost don't like the word mistake or hiccup, because you're like, man, but it really wasn't, because I just learned something I couldn't have learned. But, you know, we've obviously like made not very good hires. We've done bad, you know, lost money on deals that we probably shouldn't have done, or trusted people we shouldn't. And, you know, I kind of a couple of big things that I'm like, oh, that's really standing out to me. I wish it was something I feel like I could talk about without, you know, ruffling too many feathers. But I think the biggest thing is just, I've learned, is to just trust your gut, because there are so many times where I think for me as a CEO, it's hard when I'm going to so many different people for advice, right? And they're telling me to do this and they're telling me to do that, and to then have to then decide what's the right thing to do. And I feel like, okay, this person though, they're so much smarter than me and they told me to do this, but my gut doesn't like it, but I'm going to go with them. And every single time I've not gone with my gut, I've always regretted it. And, you know, something's, you know, there are times obviously it doesn't go terribly wrong, but some of my biggest failures have been because I didn't go with my gut. And and I think that's really important to remember, of like, there's nothing wrong with getting advice and feedback, but at the end of the day, you need to feel 100% good about the decision you're making. And then even for the mistakes I've made, I've tried really hard though to own it, and not just be like, oh, you know, well, so-and-so told me to do that. Because ultimately I made that decision. And I think owning it, and owning it to your team, that's been hard, right? To go, we did this thing a few months ago and it actually was a disaster and it's my fault. But this is what I've learned. This is what we're going to do to fix it. Here's our plan. Let's go get it done. That's been something that's been really hard for me, but I've noticed a huge just amount of respect that I feel like my team has gained from me. If they're like, Jenny's not above us, she's not better than us. She's willing to admit when she's made a decision that we all actually probably didn't agree with, but she's, you know, she's the boss. She can do that. So there's some things that I now, if I started another business, I'd be like, definitely not doing that. Yeah. Not talking to that person, but but you're grateful for him. You know, you're glad. I feel like too, what's been nice is the timing, right, of these mistakes that you've had. I feel like I always find myself saying, man, I'm so glad I learned that now. Or even reflecting of like, can you imagine if that happened now, that would have been catastrophic or whatever. Mm-hmm. But
yeah, especially as you gain more momentum.
Yeah.
I can't remember who I was talking to, but he mentioned specifically that there is a benefit to not having a lot of visibility.
No, seriously.
Like when you're initially starting out, because mistakes will happen. It's a natural part of it. And it's refreshing to know that it does happen, because overnight success is usually several years in the making.
Well, I just thought of something. So when we first started manufacturing, like our first 2 rounds of manufactured bags were terrible. Like they looked good, but the durability and the reinforcing, terrible. So we had made no money, right? Because we put it all into this manufacturing, and people's backpack straps are ripping out, right? Or it was crazy, right? And I just remember being like, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done. Like, there's nothing we can do about this. And ultimately, though, I'm like, no, because the kind of person I am, I'm just not willing to be like, you're on your own. Like, sorry, it didn't work out. And so I decided right then and there, we're going to replace every single bag that has a problem, or we'll refund them. Even though, from a financial standpoint, it's like, how are you planning on doing that? But I just knew, I'm like, we got to make it right if we're going to keep doing this. And that is something that to this day, 4 years later, I've had people come up to me like, I bought one of your first bags and, the backpack strap ripped out, and you personally emailed me and sent me a new one or refunded me or whatever. And what's crazy is, so at the time, right, I'm thinking, oh, Fawn's dead,
Yeah.
But now it's been something that we obviously learned from, and new steps we needed to take from a manufacturing standpoint. But even just from our customers and our followers that have followed us all this way, they remember that. And that's something that they're like, well, Fawn will take care of us if something happens. And like that to me is like, I'm so glad that happened in a way, you know? It's awesome.
Yeah. I think that resonates with consumers. It's not a picture perfect experience. It's what you do when something happens that you take care of them.
Yeah.
I think they're that much more invested in you.
Yeah, totally.
Just human nature is, I don't think any of us expect fully everything to go right.
Yeah.
If it does go right, you don't think too much about the
Yeah,
experience
you
other
just-
than, oh, that was a good experience. But if something goes wrong, and then this company shows that they care, there's empathy, there's a course correction that was particular to them, that's a game changer.
Oh, and I feel like that's a huge thing that set us apart from competitors, right? Is that principle is still the core of Fawn in our customer service. Is like if something's our fault, if there's a defect thing, we no questions asked, we take care of it. Or, you know, anything that fell on Fawn, and even if it doesn't, a lot of times like we send out bags and refunds and things that we maybe shouldn't, but like to me it's so much more important of we have to take care of the people taking care of us.
Right. So. And you have to be intentional with that decision because like you said, there's a financial aspect of it.
Yeah.
Where, you know, financially it probably isn't great to be refunding things that are maybe on the line, but overall brand and the longevity of your brand, you're doing a lot for that.
Totally. That's important.